edition of the EPA Project Inclusion's interview series on affordable credit. For the past 3 months, the EPA's Project Inclusion team have been interviewing stakeholders from across the industry, including credit unions, lenders, fintechs, and the occasional academic too. Early next month, we'll be publishing a report on affordable credit. But today, I'll be speaking to Neil Harris. Firstly, Neil, how are you doing? And do you want to provide a quick intro?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Thank you. I'm Neil Harris. I'm the chair of the Inclusion Foundation. Also have the honour of being the deputy chair of the EPA advisory board as well. And through both the advisory board, Project Inclusion, the EPA runs, as well as the Inclusion Foundation's own work, really looking forward to focusing in on affordable credit.
Great, thanks, Neil. You mentioned the Inclusion Foundation there, which the EPA have partnered with alongside MasterCard for this initiative. The Inclusion Foundation was established at the back end of 2019, I believe, and I imagine it's had quite a journey since then. Can you elaborate a little bit further on the mission of the Inclusion Foundation and also how that translates to affordable credit?
Sure. So our mission at the foundation is to ensure kind of financial inclusivity and financial empowerment for all. So just to put it into context, our studies show that there are 13 million households today in the UK with low financial resilience. There's been, through the COVID environment, there's been a 31% decrease in household income. And today we have an unemployment in the UK of around 5%. Optimistic views and projections see that rising to around 9.7% throughout this year and into next. The downside scenario being 13.2%. So, already in 2020, we saw 20% of households reporting that they are behind on bill payments already. So the outlook for 2021 and 22 is that there is definitely going to be more people who are faced with more vulnerable situations. They are at risk at becoming financially disengaged out of the mainstream lending, and therefore they're seeking credit provision from alternate lenders. Hence the focus with the EPA, Project Inclusion, and MasterCard and the foundation on this affordable credit focus group.
Thanks, Neil. And potentially a slightly bleak picture as we sort of move, through COVID and hopefully out of COVID soon. But you and I know that the fintech industry is no stranger to innovation, and it has, for the most part, battled the COVID crisis very well. But it's not unfair to say that a lot of people are struggling now with insecure incomes. A lot of people are turning to credit, and millions of people are accessing high-cost credit in the UK as well. What innovation do you think is needed from our industry in order to improve access to affordable credit rather than that high-cost credit?
Yeah, as you say, Tom, there's already been an enormous amount of innovation already in the unsecured credit arena during and following the pandemic. There's been the buy now, pay later schemes, which is, has absolutely driven the industry. It's grown exponentially in the last year. Now represents about £2.7 billion of consumer spend in 2020 alone. Of that breakdown, 25% of the users of that access to buy now, pay later are aged between 18 and 24. 50% are aged between 25 and 36 years old. And 90% of these transactions are all centered around fashion and footwear. So there are multiple kind of challenges that raises, more than anything, in the knowledge that 1 in 10 of those users of the buy now, pay later facility already have debt in arrears with other credit providers. So in terms of innovation, we really need to focus in on consumer protection, ensuring that education is absolutely the forefront, that there is continued transparency of cost of credit. I think the fintech industry has done a remarkable job in creating that transparency and visibility of, if you're going to pay for something, then it's there, and it's in black and white, and you can see it up front and center, so users know what they're getting into. there are some challenges around the transparency of cost of credit. However, we still need to retain that innovation and, most importantly, the accessibility that is so valued by the consumer.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. You touched on transparency there, and I think a key part of that is thinking about how there needs to be a development of broader education, on issues like affordable credit, because that's really going to help drive financial inclusion. So, what are your views on that? How can we push education a bit more?
Yeah, education is definitely a big part of the puzzle. And when I say education, it's not just about the consumer education; it's also the providers of the service, but it's also the regulators as well. So there was a recent review by it was called the Woolard Review in February 2021, which basically calls for education and support in terms of additional funding for free debt advice. There's the reform of regulatory framework for alternatives to short-term unsecured lending. And thirdly, there's a review of repeat lending and how that's conducted and how that's assessed by the providers, such that we can ensure that borrowers who are using and leveraging that service are not taken advantage of, and actually they dig themselves a deeper hole when they're already in a pretty desperate, financially vulnerable situation. So it all really does come around education. It's not just of the consumer; that's a big part of it. Transparency and visibility of the costing structure, but also with the regulator in play as well. I think to a degree the regulations are catching up, certainly with the buy now, pay later provision. So ensuring that the regulations are up to scratch and are protecting the consumer in every which way possible. And then finally, with the providers of the service themselves, that they're fully educated and they recognise their responsibility in responsible lending as well as affordable credit.
Neil, thanks so much for joining us. Some really interesting stuff on around innovation and the importance of education when it comes to affordable credit. So how can our viewers find out a little bit more about what we're trying to do as Project Inclusion?
Yeah, so to find out more about the project within the EPA, the Emerging Payments Association, you can go onto the website, which is emergingpayments.org. Click on the link, which is under the projects, and you'll find Project Inclusion under there. All the relevant information and reports, as and when it comes available, will be posted on there. Equally, from an Inclusion Foundation perspective, you can log on onto our website, which is theinclusionfoundation.org. Thank you, Tom.
Brilliant. Thanks, Neil. Thanks for joining.